Ada had always been careful with love. After a messy breakup in Lagos, she promised herself she wouldn't fall for charm or sweet words again. But when she met Michael at her cousin's wedding, that promise slowly faded. He was tall, with a calm voice and a way of looking at her that felt safe, intentional. He spoke about his dreams, his studies in Canada, and his love for home. By the end of the night, Ada found herself laughing again, something she hadn't done in a long while. They began talking daily. Calls stretched into the night, and soon he became her comfort zone. He visited Nigeria that Christmas, and by January, he had proposed. Everyone said it was fast, but Ada saw something deeper in his eyes. He told her he wanted to build a life with her, not just love, but partnership, purpose, and family. It felt real. It felt right. The wedding was beautiful. Simple but elegant. Michael held her hands at the altar and said, "I will never leave you." His family smiled proudly, and Ada's heart swelled with hope. When he returned to Canada after their wedding, they promised it was only for a short while until she could join him. The distance was hard, but love made it bearable, at least for a while. Then slowly, things changed. His calls became shorter. Messages unanswered. Excuses came often: he was busy, tired, or his internet was bad. At first, Ada believed him. But one night, when his phone went straight to voicemail for 3 days in a row, her heart began to crumble. Something inside told her that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about the man she thought was her forever. Michael's smile had a way of disarming people, confident yet gentle. When he met Ada at a small cultural event in Toronto, she was drawn to his ambition. He spoke about his dreams of building a tech startup that would connect African students abroad. Ada, who worked as a nurse, admired his determination. She had been in Canada for 5 years and understood how lonely it could get. Soon, their friendship turned into something deeper, or so Ada thought. But behind Michael's charming smile was desperation. His student visa was about to expire, and his dreams were slipping away. Nights found him staring at rejection emails, unpaid rent notices, and the dread of returning home without success. When Ada began talking about marriage and building a future together, a dangerous idea started forming in his mind. One evening, as they walked along Lake Ontario, Ada shared her hope of starting a family. Michael hesitated but then held her hand tightly. "Ada, I see my future with you," he said softly, his voice trembling with sincerity or guilt. That night, Ada believed him completely. She told her friends she had finally met the one. The wedding came months later, small, intimate, and beautiful. Michael looked into Ada's eyes and vowed to love her forever. But in his heart, the vows were a means to an end. The moment he received his permanent residency, he began to change. Late-night calls turned into ignored texts, affectionate words became silence, and soon, Michael packed up and left. Ada's world collapsed. The man she thought was her soulmate had vanished, leaving behind nothing but cold paperwork and a broken promise. But destiny wasn't done with Michael. The choices he made that year would come back, not in whispers, but in thunder. For weeks after Michael left, Ada lived in denial. She replayed every memory, every text, every word he had ever said, searching for clues she had missed. At first, she convinced herself he just needed space. Maybe the stress of a new job, or adjusting to life after school. But when his number stopped going through, and mutual friends admitted he'd blocked them all, the truth crashed into her like a wave: Michael wasn't coming back. Days turned into months. Ada went to work, smiled for patients, and cried in the bathroom during her breaks. The pain wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation. She had opened her heart and her home, only to become another story of love and betrayal whispered in immigrant communities. She gave him papers, they said. He used her. Michael, meanwhile, was living his version of success, or so he thought. He'd moved to another city, started a new job, and even began seeing someone else. For a while, he convinced himself he'd done what he had to do. It was survival, he told his reflection. She'll be fine. But deep down, the silence between him and Ada haunted him more than he admitted. Every time his new girlfriend laughed or every time someone mentioned home, he felt a sharp tug of guilt he couldn't shake off. Ada tried to rebuild. She started therapy, joined a local women's group, and slowly began to rediscover herself. Her friends called her strong, but strength didn't erase the ache of betrayal. Some nights she would scroll through old photos, the two of them smiling, arms wrapped around each other, and whisper, "Why, Michael?" But life has a strange way of keeping receipts. And the same silence that Ada endured would soon echo back into Michael's world, louder, heavier, and impossible to ignore. 3 years passed, and Michael thought he had outrun his past. He'd secured a good job, gained his permanent residency, and was living with a woman who adored him. On paper, everything looked perfect. But behind that paper-thin peace, his life was quietly unraveling. It began with little things. Insomnia. Guilt-filled dreams where Ada's face appeared, calm but disappointed. Then came the unease, the subtle sense that no matter how hard he tried, nothing brought him joy. His new girlfriend, Leah, started to notice. "You're always distracted," she said one night. "Even when you smile, it doesn't reach your eyes." Michael brushed it off, claiming stress. But the truth was, his conscience had never stopped whispering. Meanwhile, Ada had found purpose again. She'd gone back to school for her nursing degree and was thriving in her career. She wasn't the same woman Michael left behind, she was stronger, more self-aware, and slowly learning that forgiveness wasn't about letting someone off the hook, but freeing herself from the weight of their betrayal. Yet even in her new strength, the memory of him lingered, a scar that had healed, but not faded. Michael's world took a darker turn when Leah discovered his past. She found an old photo, him and Ada on their wedding day. "Who is she?" Leah demanded. He hesitated too long, and the silence said everything. Within days, Leah was gone. The house felt colder than ever, and for the first time, Michael was forced to confront the emptiness he'd built his life on. He had gained his papers, his freedom, his chance at success, but in the process, he had lost something far more valuable, his peace. And life was about to remind him that the universe never forgets a debt left unpaid. Michael's decline wasn't sudden, it was slow, like a building quietly crumbling from within. He started missing work, drowning his nights in alcohol, convincing himself he could silence the noise in his head. But guilt has a stubborn way of echoing louder when ignored. One night, after another argument with his boss, he found himself walking aimlessly through the streets. Snow fell in heavy flakes, blanketing the city in silence. For the first time, he felt small, a stranger in a country that no longer felt like home. He remembered the day Ada cooked for him in their tiny apartment, how she'd smiled and said, "Home is where you're loved, Michael." He hadn't understood it then, but now the meaning hit him with brutal clarity. He had traded love for convenience, and now he had neither. Back in Nigeria, Ada's life was finally beginning to bloom. She'd saved up enough to start her own small clinic in her hometown, helping women and children. Her friends admired her resilience. Yet sometimes, she'd pause during quiet moments and wonder if Michael ever thought of her, not out of longing, but closure. "He took advantage of my kindness," she once told her colleague. But maybe he was just lost. Fate, however, wasn't done connecting their stories. Months later, Michael lost his job. His drinking got worse. Then came the letter from immigration, a random review of his permanent residency documents. "A simple process," they said. But Michael knew the truth: if they dug deep enough, they'd find the lies buried beneath. He sat in his dark apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills and silence. The same silence Ada had endured when he left her. Only now, it was his turn to sit in it. Karma wasn't loud. It was patient. And now, it was knocking softly on his door. When Michael received the official letter summoning him for an immigration review, his hands trembled so hard that the paper nearly slipped from his fingers. He reread every line, hoping he'd misunderstood. But the message was clear: his case had been flagged for further verification. The walls around him seemed to close in. Years ago, that letter would have meant nothing. Back then, he was confident, reckless, sure of his ability to talk his way out of anything. But time had stripped him bare. He was no longer the ambitious student chasing a dream, he was a man haunted by his own reflection. Michael tried to gather documents, call old friends, even reach out to a lawyer. But deep down, he knew what this was: karma catching up in slow motion. The lawyer asked him a simple question that froze him in place: did you marry for love or papers? Meanwhile, Ada was in Nigeria, sitting in her clinic's small office when she got a message from an old friend abroad: Michael was in trouble. For a long moment, she just stared at her phone. There was no joy in the news, no satisfaction. Only a deep, complicated ache. She remembered his laughter, the way he used to hold her hand, and then the betrayal that shattered it all. Ada whispered softly to herself, he's reaping what he sowed. But even as she said it, a part of her heart, the same one that once loved him, ached with pity. Michael spent sleepless nights replaying his choices. Every lie, every excuse, every selfish decision circled him like ghosts. He thought about calling Ada, not to ask for help, but to say sorry. But he didn't know if he deserved her forgiveness. Outside, snow fell again, cold, quiet, relentless. It reminded him of how far he'd fallen and how easily the world moves on without you. One cold evening, Michael finally did what he'd been avoiding for years: he called Ada. His hand shook as he stared at her name on the screen, wondering if she'd even remember him, or worse, if she'd already erased him from her life completely. When she finally picked up, her voice was calm, measured, but distant. Michael, she said, like his name was something fragile she didn't want to touch. He swallowed hard. Ada. I didn't know who else to call. Silence stretched between them. He could hear the hum of her ceiling fan, the faint noise of Lagos traffic in the background. She was home, steady, successful, whole. Everything he wasn't. I heard, she said quietly. About your immigration issue. Michael exhaled. I just wanted to talk. Not for help, just to hear a familiar voice. Ada almost laughed. After all these years. After the way you left. Her voice trembled, a mix of hurt and disbelief. You didn't think about hearing my voice when you disappeared, did you? He closed his eyes. No. I was a coward, Ada. I thought if I left fast enough, I could leave the guilt behind too. There was another pause, softer this time. You can't outrun what you plant, Michael. It grows whether you want it to or not. Her words pierced deeper than any punishment immigration could give him. But there was something else in her tone, not anger, not forgiveness, just truth. Do you hate me? He finally asked. Ada took a deep breath. I don't hate you. I just stopped expecting anything from you. That's what healed me. Michael's eyes filled with tears. It was the peace in her voice that broke him, because it was the kind of peace he'd been searching for, but never earned. When the call ended, Ada sat still for a long time. And even though she didn't know it, a tear rolled down her cheek too, not for the man Michael was, but for the one he could have been. A week later, Michael showed up at Ada's office. No warning, no call, just him, standing there like a ghost from another life. His face was thinner, his eyes tired, his posture defeated. But when he saw her, something flickered, hope, maybe. Ada froze. It felt like the world around her had stopped spinning. Her co-workers noticed, whispering quietly, unsure who the stranger in the worn-out jacket was. She took a deep breath and walked toward him. "Michael," she said softly. "Ada, you look good." His voice was barely above a whisper. She gave a polite smile. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said quickly, "but I needed to see you. Just once. To apologize face to face." Ada hesitated, then motioned for him to follow her outside. They stood under the shade of an old tree near the parking lot, the same kind of tree that had once stood in her parents' compound in Enugu, back when life felt simple. "I ruined your life," Michael began. "And I told myself you'd be better off without me. But I see now that wasn't love, that was fear." Ada studied his face, the guilt was real. Time had stripped away his pride. "You didn't ruin my life," she said finally. "You just changed its direction. I had to become someone stronger because of you." Michael looked away, ashamed. "I lost everything, Ada. My job, my residency, even my health. It's like karma followed me everywhere." Ada nodded slowly. "It's not karma, Michael. It's consequence. But maybe, this time, you're ready to face it." They stood in silence for a while. Then, Ada reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. "This isn't money," she said. "It's the address of a local NGO that helps deportees rebuild their lives. They can help you find your footing again." Michael's lips trembled. "You're helping me?" "I'm not helping you," she said firmly. "I'm freeing myself from what you left behind." As she turned to leave, Michael whispered, "Thank you." Ada didn't respond. But for the first time in years, both of them walked away lighter, her from the past, and him toward redemption. That night, Ada couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from her meeting with Michael. His face, older, broken, humbled, kept flashing before her eyes. 4 years, she had imagined what she'd say if she ever saw him again. But when it finally happened, she hadn't felt anger or revenge. She had felt peace. In the stillness of the night, Ada realized something powerful: forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about her. She had carried his ghost for so long, letting it haunt her success, her relationships, her trust. But now, the ghost was gone. Yet closure, she learned, wasn't loud. It came like a whisper, quiet, but deeply felt. The next morning, she brewed her coffee and stared out her apartment window, watching the sunrise. It painted the city in gold and orange, as if reminding her that life renews itself every day. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael. "Thank you, Ada. I went to the NGO. They gave me a place to stay. I'll start community work next week. You were right, it's not too late to start again." Ada exhaled deeply, smiling faintly. She didn't reply. Some conversations were meant to end in silence. Later that day, she visited her mother's grave for the first time in years. She knelt down and whispered, "Mama, I'm finally free." The wind blew gently, carrying her words into the quiet sky. Just then, her phone rang again, a call from the same publishing house she had once pitched her memoir to. "Ms. Ada Okafor," the voice said. "We've reviewed your manuscript. We'd love to publish your story." Ada's heart skipped a beat. Her pain, once her prison, was now her platform. That evening, she began rewriting her life, not as a victim, but as a voice. The title came easily: "He Married Me for Papers, but Karma Had Other Plans." She smiled, her heart light, her purpose clear. Across town, Michael sat on a narrow bed in a shared shelter, staring at the peeling wall. His hands trembled as he clutched a small notebook, one Ada had given him during their early days in Canada. On the first page, her handwriting still shone clearly, "Dream loud, Michael. Even if no one believes in you yet." He hadn't realized how deeply those words had guided him, even when he strayed. Now, as the silence pressed around him, regret settled heavy on his chest like a shadow. Every lie, every selfish choice, came rushing back, the way he'd used her love, the way he'd justified it as survival, the way he'd walked away thinking he could outrun guilt. But guilt had a long memory. At the shelter, a volunteer approached him, a cheerful young woman named Lisa. "You're Michael, right? Heard you'll be helping with the youth mentorship program next week." He nodded quietly. "Yeah. I'm trying to make things right." She smiled warmly. "Sometimes, trying is the bravest start." That night, Michael lay awake listening to the hum of the city outside. His thoughts drifted back to Ada, not the successful woman he'd just seen, but the young woman who once waited for him in their small apartment, cooking egusi soup while humming old Nigerian songs. He remembered her laughter, her kindness, her belief that love could fix anything. A tear rolled down his cheek. He whispered into the darkness, "I'm sorry, Ada." Meanwhile, Ada sat by her writing desk miles away, penning the final chapter of her book. As she wrote Michael's name, a strange peace filled her. She wasn't writing to shame him, she was writing to free both of them. Her story wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. And somewhere in the city's quiet heartbeat, both souls, once broken by deceit, began to heal in their own ways. But destiny wasn't done with them yet. Because just when Ada thought her past was behind her, an unexpected letter arrived in her mailbox. The envelope was cream-colored, slightly wrinkled, and stamped with the Nigerian postal mark. Ada frowned, turning it over in her hands. She hadn't received a letter from home in years. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, careful, deliberate, almost shaky. When she finally tore it open, her eyes widened. It was from Michael's mother. "My daughter Ada," the letter began, "I don't know if you will ever forgive my son. I don't even know if I should ask. But I have carried a secret for many years, one that may help you understand the man he became." Ada's hands trembled as she read on. The words cut deep. Michael's mother revealed that before leaving Nigeria, Michael had borrowed money from dangerous people to fund his trip. When he couldn't repay, they threatened his life, and hers. In desperation, he saw Ada's love not as a gift, but as a lifeline. "He wanted to be worthy of you," the letter said, "but fear made him foolish. And when he finally gained safety, guilt turned him into a coward." Tears blurred Ada's vision. She dropped the letter on her desk and stared blankly ahead. The truth didn't erase the pain, but it painted a fuller picture. Michael wasn't just a manipulator, he was also a man broken by his own choices. The last line of the letter stopped her heart. "Michael is very ill now. He doesn't want you to know, but I had to tell you. I fear he doesn't have long." Ada sat in silence. For years, she dreamed of him suffering, of karma finding its way back to him. But now that it had, she felt no victory. Just sorrow. The next morning, she booked a flight to Lagos. Not to rekindle what was lost, but to finally put everything to rest. Little did she know, this trip would uncover one last twist that would change everything she believed about karma, forgiveness, and love. The Lagos air hit Ada's face like a memory, humid, chaotic, alive. The city had changed, yet somehow, it still pulsed with the same restless rhythm she remembered. From the crowded streets of Ikeja to the smell of roasted corn near the airport, Every sound, every scent pulled her back to the woman she used to be. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. Not even Michael's mother. It wasn't about grand gestures or confrontation. It was about closure, the kind that demanded presence, not words. When she finally arrived at Michael's old neighborhood, time seemed to have paused there. The walls were cracked, the roof rusted. Children played barefoot in the dust, laughing, unaware of the pain the street once held for her. A neighbor recognized her almost instantly. "Ah, you're Michael's wife, ABI. Mama Michael talk say you fit come one day." Ada forced a faint smile. "Where is he now?" The neighbor pointed toward a small, faded house down the road. "He no day strong again. Now he mama day take care of him." As Ada approached the door, her heartbeat thundered in her chest. Part of her wanted to turn back. To let her success and peace remain untouched by the ghosts of the past. But something deeper, maybe mercy, maybe destiny, pushed her forward. When the door opened, Michael's mother stood there, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Ada," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "My daughter." They embraced in silence. Years of bitterness, misunderstanding, and distance melted into quiet tears. Then, Ada stepped into the dimly lit room, and there he was. Michael. Thinner, paler, a shell of the confident man who once left her behind. His eyes fluttered open slowly. When they met hers, he froze. "Ada," he whispered, his voice frail. I thought I'd never see you again." She stood there, torn between compassion and pain. "You almost didn't," she said softly. But as she looked into his sunken eyes, the anger she expected didn't come. Instead, she felt something far more complicated, pity. And then, Michael said something that changed everything. "Ada, before I die, there's something you need to know." Michael's voice trembled like an old radio signal, fading in and out. His eyes, once full of ego and pride, now held nothing but regret. Ada pulled a wooden chair closer and sat, her heart pounding in her chest. He swallowed hard before speaking. "Ada, the truth is, I didn't just marry you for papers. I thought I did, at first. But somewhere along the line, I fell for you. Truly. And that scared me." Ada's chest tightened. She wanted to look away, to stay angry, but something in his tone kept her still. "I was drowning," he continued. "Back then, I couldn't tell what was love and what was survival. When the papers came through, I panicked. I told myself leaving you would help me escape the guilt, but I only dug my own grave." He coughed violently, and his mother hurried in with a cup of water. Ada instinctively reached out to steady him. Their hands brushed, a simple touch, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid. Michael caught his breath, then looked at her again. "There's more," he whispered. "When I left, I never stopped checking on you. I watched you grow from afar, your business, your interviews, your book." He smiled weakly. "You became everything I knew you could be." Tears welled in Ada's eyes. "Why tell me all this now?" He exhaled shakily. "Because I need you to know I didn't just take from you. You gave me something I couldn't buy, conscience. You saved me before I even knew I needed saving." Silence filled the room. For the first time in decades, Ada's anger dissolved. In its place was something unexpected, release. Michael leaned back, closing his eyes. "Thank you, for not hating me." Ada wanted to reply, but her throat closed up. When she finally found her voice, it was barely a whisper. "I never stopped wishing you peace." A faint smile formed on his lips. "Then maybe I can rest." As his breathing slowed, Ada felt an ache deeper than words, not of love regained, but of a chapter finally ending. The next morning, the house was still, too still. Ada woke to the sound of quiet sobs from the next room. When she entered, Michael's mother was kneeling beside the bed, clutching her son's hand. His body lay motionless, his eyes closed peacefully. Michael was gone. For a long time, Ada just stood there, frozen. The finality of it all sank in slowly, like the sun setting behind a storm. He had left again, but this time, not out of betrayal. Out of surrender. Out of peace. His mother turned to her, tears streaking her wrinkled face. "He waited for you, my daughter. He said he couldn't go until he saw you one last time." Ada knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands. "He found his peace, Mama. That's all that matters now." They buried him beneath an old mango tree behind the family house. The same tree Michael had once carved their initials into decades ago. As the red earth fell over his casket, Ada whispered a prayer, not of anger, not of grief, but of release. That night, she sat on the veranda, staring at the stars. Lagos hummed softly in the distance, full of life and stories just like hers, stories of love, loss, and the strange grace that sometimes hides in pain. She pulled out her journal and wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't erase what was done. It frees you from what was left behind." The wind brushed gently through her hair, almost like a whisper of goodbye. When she returned to her hotel later that evening, she found a small envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a folded note and a faded photograph, her and Michael on their wedding day, smiling, young, full of dreams. On the back of the photo, in shaky handwriting, were Michael's final words. "You were my beginning and my lesson. Thank you for teaching me love." Tears streamed down her face. For the first time in years, they weren't bitter, they were cleansing. But just as Ada thought the past was fully buried, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number, one that would open a door she never saw coming. Ada hesitated before answering the call. "Hello," she said softly, expecting perhaps a condolence message or a wrong number. But the voice on the other end made her heart skip. "Hello, ma'am. My name is Daniel. I think Michael was my father." The world seemed to stop. Ada gripped the phone tighter, her breath catching in her throat. "Your father," she repeated slowly. "Yes, ma'am. My mother told me the truth after he passed. She said he always wanted to reach out but didn't want to disrupt your life. He left a note for me, with your name on it." Ada's knees weakened, and she sat down. Decades of confusion suddenly felt small compared to this moment. "Where are you calling from?" "Toronto," the young man replied. "He asked me to find you one day, to thank you. He said you changed the course of his life, and mine." Tears welled in Ada's eyes. She didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. Yet beneath the shock was something strangely familiar, that same ache of unfinished love, now reborn in another form. Daniel continued, "He told me, if I ever met you, I should tell you he was proud of the woman you became." His voice cracked. "I just wanted to say thank you, on his behalf." Ada's silence stretched long between them, then she whispered, "Daniel, you have nothing to thank me for. Your father's story, it taught me everything I needed to learn about grace." They spoke for hours that night, about Michael, about choices, about second chances. By the time she hung up, the heaviness in her chest had lifted completely. Weeks later, back in Canada, Ada attended the launch of her book. The hall was full, her story now a mirror for thousands who had loved, lost, and learned to forgive. As she signed copies, a young man stepped forward, tall, nervous, familiar. It was Daniel. He handed her a small package. "He wanted you to have this," he said. Inside was a golden locket, engraved with two simple words, *, still grateful. *. Ada smiled, eyes glistening. So am I, she whispered. That night, as applause filled the room and camera flashes bathed her in light, she finally understood what karma truly meant, not revenge, but restoration. Not punishment, but peace. Because sometimes, the universe doesn't return pain. It returns closure. Do you believe in karma or in grace? What lesson did Ada's story teach you about love, forgiveness, and second chances? And that's the end of Ada and Michael's story, a journey of love, betrayal, and the quiet justice of karma. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without subscribing to Priceless Folktales, where we bring you more powerful life lessons and unforgettable stories every week. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and join our growing family of storytellers and dreamers. Until next time, remember, every action writes a story, but karma decides how it ends.